Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I hope you guys are all staying safe and healthy during this time of this pandemic. My name is Michelle Michael, and I am the National Account Manager here at Sennovate. Today, we are going to be talking about security in the time of the remote workforce. Before we get started, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. Please feel free to ask questions at any time, and we will answer them all at the end. Definitely rate our webinar and leave your feedback, as it's very valuable to us. And please share this webinar with your team or your network. To get started, I would like to make an introduction to the speakers today. We have Senthil Palaniappan. He is the CEO and founder at Sennovate. Senthil has 25 years of industry experience, specializing in identity and access management, security operations center, application infrastructure, and integration. He has consulted with various Fortune companies, including Sun Microsystems, Oracle, IBM, and many more. Senthil also has an MBA from the Keller School of Management in Chicago. And to move on to our next speaker, his name is Vishnu Verma. He is the Senior Director of Product Management at Idaptive. Vishnu has spent the last 18 years developing, designing, and bringing security solutions to the market. At Idaptive currently, he is responsible for bringing to market intelligent MFA and IAM solutions, which leveraging machine learning and identity analytics. And prior to Idaptive, Vishnu spent many years securing applications and networks at F5 Networks, as well as Cisco Systems. Vishnu also has an MBA from Carnegie Mellon and an MS in electrical engineering from North Carolina State University. Well, this is it for me, and I hope you guys all enjoy the webinar. And Senthil, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope all are staying safe during this corona pandemic. And most probably, most of the people are working from home or working remotely. That's why, this webinar is going to address, how do we secure our digital assets during this kind of situation. And I think it's going to be a new normal moving forward. Having said that, hello, Vishnu. Thank you for joining. And today he is going to be our key presenter and having a lot of credentials behind him. And so I'm really excited to hear from Vishnu. Hi, Vishnu.
Hey, Senthil, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I hope everybody is staying safe, including our audience.
I hope so as well. And Vishnu, I think this is a very exciting topic today, this one, talking about the remote, because this has been kind of talking for the last 10, 15 years, but kind of on and off started, but now I can't believe it's become a new normal. And having said that, why identity access management becoming more critical when it comes to security, breach prevention and detection? Can we start with that question, Vishnu?
Yeah, absolutely, Senthil. So first of all, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on wherever you guys are, right? And Senthil, that's a great way to start this webinar. And as we are going through these challenging times, what we have seen, and even before this new normal, if you may call it that, even before this, there was a big trend in remote workers, and more and more folks were working remotely. I got the statistics from somewhere that 88% of enterprises were actually provisioning remote users, and 44%, there was an increase in 44%. And with that, and this is the slide that I'm sharing is basically highlighting some of the issues with credentials management, right? And breaches that involve weak or stolen credentials. And this is from the Verizon data breach report. and consistently, they have released this report 3 years in a row, starting 2017 and 2018 and 2019, and pretty much the first statistics right there, 81% of breaches involve basically weak or stolen credentials, and some of the tactics that hackers or malicious users are using, that has gone up tenfold, right? And one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of us, like including myself, guilty as charged, 50% of users are using the same password for personal and work accounts. So that basically means that the tactics that these malicious users are using is sort of their work is made easy by some of the practices that we as end users are employing when we try to secure our own accounts. So basically what has happened is that identity has now become the new perimeter, right? Or security perimeter. Gone are the days when you used to have a firewall, a data center, DMZ zone, and after that, pretty much everybody was trying to get access to the critical resources through other protection mechanisms like network access protection and all that. But now, with all of these credentials getting stolen and the increase in this trend, what we are seeing is that identity has now become the true security perimeter and the most important vector that must be secured. In other words, basically what's happening is that the person who's breaching, the attacker, gone are the days, even though they are still doing denial of service and all that, but more often than not, because of some of the data and trends that we're seeing, they're just logging in. They're just logging in as you and me, and going about stealing critical information and attacking business critical applications.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Even that become much harder now with the remote work situation. Like you said, the identity perimeter has literally expanded now. And so in your opinion, Vishnu, what problems does that pose for IT network and security teams and network teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, what has happened is that those reports, Verizon data breach report, they have been published even before this pandemic, and they were seeing this increase in breaches due to credentials getting stolen. Now imagine that identity perimeter literally and physically getting expanded because of this new trend or the new normal. And what has happened is that now as an IT administrator or as an employee, now you have to worry about the same issues in context of some of the additional challenges now that come with the fact that that employees are remote, or partners are remote, or consumers obviously are remote and as well. So the number one challenge is there is no direct access for employees, for the B2E use case, business to employee, or B2B, business to business, or B2C use case, where employees are getting direct access to their IT department for, let's say, token issuance, or if they get locked out, then they can raise a case or just walk up to the IT department and get a new token or get their account unlocked. And vice versa, the IT department now has no control over what kinds of devices employees are using. They are sitting at home over their own ISP provided internet, using some sort of internet access, which may be exposing some of the critical information as they try to access the corporate network. The second is there is no loss of direct corporate connectivity, right? I mean, when you are logged in, you come into the office, you scan your badge, you come in, there is already some layer of protection built in as you come in and start doing your day-to-day work, right? But now that is gone, right? Now I cannot, as an IT administrator, rest assured that, hey, everybody, I have a rule in my access policy saying that for corporate IP, anybody logging in from the corporate IP can be treated, with less, in terms of criticality versus somebody coming from outside. Now everybody's coming from outside, and that basically is now a challenge and a headache for the IT department. And then obviously the number of applications that employees are using or partners are using has exploded. Right now they're just going to a collaboration software. All of the collaboration is now happening from their work, accessing all these applications built in the cloud, or they are, which brings me to the third point, is using infrastructure or network access infrastructure, such as VPNs, to gain access to resources which may be on-prem, and thereby now you have to worry about making sure that you are securing those accesses, you're securing those applications in the cloud. There may be shadow IT. Employees may be just going to, swiping the credit card, getting access to an application and dumping data, which otherwise they would not have done had they been on-prem, right? And last but not the least, if you are basing your access policies, and even if you already had a risk-aware access system or adaptive access system, that gets stripped as well, because let's say you had a normal behavior pattern established for all the users. Now all of these users, their patterns have totally changed in the past couple of months. They are accessing applications from different geographies, different IPs, different networks, different devices. So you have to re-establish and relearn some of these behavioral patterns, when it comes to relearning and applying access policies based on risk awareness. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely, Vishnu. That really summarizes the new challenges in the modern enterprise. Thank you. And so that kind of pops up another one. I think the Idaptive and Sennovate, we are great partners. Every time I learn about Idaptive, it's really exciting. And the one thing I always look at is we know Idaptive is all about zero trust IAM solutions. So what components of zero trust strategy is the key in addressing the security problems posed by this remote workforce, Vishnu?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I always believe in keeping calm and doing what you do best, even in challenging times like these, if you have certain rules of thumb, right? And zero trust actually gives us those thumb rules, right? Saying that I'm just going to use the slide to basically talk about some of the establishing principles and pillars, if you will, right? I'll build the slide out. So basically, if you keep calm and doing what the zero trust mandates you to do or lays down as best practices, then even challenging times like these, when zero trust principles are applied to the use cases, to the same use cases and challenges that we discussed in the previous question, they will get addressed because the basic founding principles of securing based on network zero trust does not change. So first and foremost, validate the users who are trying to access the resources protected by, let's say, an IAM solution. And that is done by various authentication mechanisms at varying levels of assurances. Like there are level of assurance 1, 2, and 3 as laid down by the NIST publication for the different access scenarios under different conditions and through a disparate set of devices. And which brings me to the second principle, which is validating the device itself, right? So once you verified the user, you need to validate the device by ensuring that the devices that are being used are complying with certain policies, right? They're not jailbroken, for instance. They are at a particular OS version level and all of that, and they're not compromised. And then richer context can be derived based on these devices that are being used by the remote workforce to log in. And last but not the least is intelligently limiting their access. So it's not just about logging in, but also making sure that you log in with or access the right resources with the right level of privileges, right? And that gives and that could be based on, for example, the user's riskiness or the risk level of the user that the user brings in for a given access request, right? For the various resources that the user is trying to access. So, for instance, I'm logging in today from my home and trying to get access to my my OneDrive. So this intelligent system sort of detects that as an anomaly and says that, okay, this is not normal, and maybe steps up the authentication. But if I keep doing that, it learns about my new normal behavior and intelligently then elevates my privilege so that I'm able to access the right folders on my OneDrive.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I think let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. Okay.
Basically, if I move that zero trust principle and apply the same concepts to the challenges, if you remember, we talked about a few slides ago. So the first one was obviously not, employees don't have access to the IT team. IT don't have ready access or 24/7 access to employees if required. So the first and foremost, we need to make sure that we equip the workforce with self-service tools. They should be able to, and we'll talk more about self-service subsequently, but self-service becomes a critical piece in not just making sure that you're securing, but also making sure that your employees and your workforce is not getting frustrated, their productivity is not getting hampered, right? So self-service, any solution that promotes self-service should be looked at. The second challenge, if you remember, we talked about access to corporate network is lost. So that means if you were authenticating, you were walking into the office, and then you were authenticating with your on-prem Active Directory. Now, all of a sudden, you're off-prem, you get a new laptop, for instance, for whatever reason, or you need to authenticate with a system which is on-prem, then you must have a good solution which helps you broker that authentication or brokered access to any on-prem solution, through remote endpoints, whether mobile or Mac or Windows PC, right? And then obviously the third thing we talked about was the excessive use of network infrastructure, right? Gartner talks about ZTNA, for instance, Zero Trust Network Access. There are increased use of CASB providers, for instance. There are cloud-based applications that need to be protected. There are cloud-based VDI solutions. So a lot of infrastructure then gets accessed through network access layers, and that needs to be protected. So that means your solution then needs to make sure that access to the network itself is secured through MFA, for instance, right? And last but not the least, your solution, your access and identity access management solution must be able to relearn your new behavior, your new normal pattern, in a efficient manner. By efficiency, what I mean is it's not just about something touting to have machine learning capabilities, but also it depends on what features it is gathering from a user's behavior and how fast it is able to model it, normalize it, and model it, and factor it in the normal course, which should not be excessive in terms of time it takes to really relearn the new normal behavior for the remote workforce. So in short, basically, so all of this is then also secured by MFA. The multi-factor authentication becomes the key piece to all of this, and that basically means that that if you really summarize how a user is accessing these critical applications, they basically start with the user sitting at home, using their endpoints, using these network infrastructure, VPNs, CASBs, and then gaining access to the applications. So what then basically that means is that for each of these segments, you need to make sure what is really important to you. Like, for example, for the users you're talking about, right? What are the levels of assurances that are important for what levels of users? For example, you may want to have different policies or different authentication profiles for your executives versus your sales versus your engineers, depending on what resources they're accessing. And then which mechanisms are you using to fulfill those levels of assurances, right? So there are like 4 levels of assurance, start as laid down by NIST. So depending on, 1 is what you know, 2 is what you have, 3 is what you are, and 4 is actually physically being present there, right? And there are mechanisms laid down by NIST. So you need to, as an IT administrator, while you're rolling this out, you need to be thinking about what assurance levels, what mechanisms, what are the self-service features that you would like to turn on for one role of users versus the other set of users. And then on the endpoint side, you need to make sure that folks logging in are protected through MFA policy, right? Adaptive MFA policy, not just logging in with their regular corporate credentials. And then also anything that enriches that access to the endpoint by pairing up with management features as well, device management features as well, is obviously much more preferred. And then on the infrastructure side, you need to think about what additional layers of access policies, including MFA, need to be designed for accessing VPN, VDI solutions, CASB integrations, proxies such as, for example, ADCs, application delivery controllers, sitting in front of applications, and then also gaining VPN-less access. So a lot of times you don't really need to rely on legacy access solutions such as VPN if you can really gain access to them in a VPN-less fashion, protected by identity management solution. And last but not the least, the applications themselves, the consideration should be that ideally these are modern applications which support modern protocols, access protocols such as SAML, OIDC, OAuth, right? If not, then you should be looking at enhancing that with a proxy integration, which can then act as a SAML proxy or a OIDC proxy for the legacy application. And also, you may want to decide to treat different applications in a different manner depending on the sensitivity of a given application or the kind of data that a given application is housing. You may want to have per app policies. So an example could be that an executive trying to log in through the endpoint is using different VPN profile to log in into their OneDrive versus an engineer who is trying to gain access to their servers in AWS, and they'll have a different role and different ways to access. And last but not the least, you see these two horizontal cutting across these four segments are the two key pieces, adaptive MFA policy. So everything, all of those segments are protected by authentication access policies, which have MFA as multi-factor authentication as a key piece. And the MFA itself is driven by an intelligent user behavior analytics and also visibility and reporting for incident investigation and remediation.
Wonderful. That's a very good the slide. This one really clearly segmenting how the users, endpoints, access infrastructure, and application, and also it says that in adaptive MFA, that is the key with the user behavior analytics. And it seems like MFA is the heart of some solutions. So what are the top considerations for MFA solutions? Vishnu, would you be able to cover that?
Yeah, absolutely. So MFA, depending on what, as I said, it basically adds another layer on top of security that allows an IT administrator to sleep well at night, because they know that even though if their credentials, the first challenge is compromised, nobody can really get to the second level unless they can fulfill the second layer challenge. Obviously, the user needs to confirm their identity, and then by fulfilling those two factors, and then adaptive MFA itself is helping the security team apply conditional access, and these conditions could be static or dynamic based on a machine learning system, which runs and collects information about the user and detects anomalies and automatically steps up or down the authentication mechanism. But really, to really simplify and look at it from a 30,000 view, is the top consideration is, again, the delivery model of the MFA, and especially in the case of remote workforce, you really want something which is secure, easily accessible, and which doesn't involve a lot of on-prem footprint or capital investment at the very outset. So you want a cloud-based solution. The delivery model should be cloud-based with minimal to zero on-prem footprint or investment. And then the second would be what and who can it protect, right? What applications can it protect? It's not just applications, by the way, right? We saw in the previous slide the four segments. Starting from the right, you have the applications, then you have the infrastructure pieces like the VPNs and the CASPs, then you have the endpoints, your mobile phones, your tablets, your Mac and other Windows PCs, right? You have to protect that. And then obviously the user itself, the identity itself, right? But it also uses certain mechanisms, right? So what mechanisms is it able to use, which basically falls in the how category, right? So you start with the delivery model, what you need to protect, how it protects, what different mechanisms. Is it standard compliant? Does it have good compliance and support for standards like FIDO2, right? Which are the fast identity online standard, which helps users take advantage of some of the WebAuthn compliant authenticators, which are being shipped by endpoint manufacturers such as Windows Hello and such, and macOS Touch ID. And last but not the least, and something which gets really overlooked by security administrators, is the visibility and reporting piece. You as a security administrator, you need to roll out this at scale really fast because everybody just goes and starts working remote. So your scale basically shoots up in a very short time. So you need to roll out adoption of MFA and access policies. You don't want to have a situation where somebody is not able to log in into the VPN because they don't have the right mechanisms to log in, right? So there's this risk of users getting locked out because of lack of mechanisms, right? And last but not the least, in terms of investigation, if there is a suspicious activity, then your tool should be able to provide good visibility into what really happened in that time frame when this suspicious activity happened, who logged, from which location, what device, what application were they trying to access, and what MFA mechanisms were they trying to use. So all of that information must be readily available on demand, by the identity access management solution. So these, I would say, would be the top considerations when really looking for the right MFA solution.
So very nice. This one, I think, it pretty much covers the all four segments of any remote user or any user access as that matter, and it covers that, like you said, delivery model, who and what can it protect, and how does it protect, and the visibility. That's the most important thing. Having said that,
Right.
Can you please highlight some of the top use cases or specific to the end user?
Absolutely. So remember, to really have a happy end user, and actually let me just, what is most important and which really gets built in the slide is this aspect. An MFA prompt must never surprise the end user, right? A lot of times what happens is you try to roll out an MFA solution and all of a sudden you're getting calls from your end users, and in this case, remote workforce. So basically, a good MFA solution is adaptive and steps up and down the MFA policies based on the risk level. And I, as an end user, if I get prompted for the second prompt, I should never get surprised. I should actually be happy that I was prompted for fulfilling that. But in terms of specific use cases for the end user themselves, and we talked about, remember, the challenges being the end user not having access to ready access, 24/7 access to the IT teams, because they may not have network access or just not the time of day. So self-service really becomes important. A lot of times, help desk tickets and inefficiencies in operations and help desk operations is driven by the fact that folks are calling in to reset their password, right? So you really want to enable your end users and remote workforce to self-serve themselves using MFA, so that you're not compromising security over self-service, right? So using MFA, this solution, the IAM solution, should be able to drive self-service reset of their own password. And some of the use cases I'll just quickly breeze through would be unlock their own corporate accounts using MFA again. So MFA needs to be at the heart of driving self-service, right? So resetting, unlocking, gaining access to applications. So remember, we talked about the different types of users. So, even though everybody has gone remote and working from home, but their roles haven't changed. A CEO is a CEO, an engineer is an engineer, a UX designer is a UX designer, a sales guy is a sales guy, right? So their roles haven't changed. So that you have role-based access control, but a lot of times what happens is you need to grant access to certain applications for a temporary period to a certain set of users or to a certain user, and you should be able to mark certain applications for such access workflows. So I, as a user, can then temporarily request for access, and this drives governance as well, where we are able to, for a temporary short time, elevate the privileges so that you can have access to a certain set of applications. And then obviously enrolling of new authenticators and other mechanisms is also critical. Now you don't have an IT department where you can walk up and say that, hey, give me a hardware token, right, which is already pre-registered and pre-enrolled with your IT system. Now with the advent of standards such as FIDO2, if I am using a BYOD Windows laptop, I should be able to register the Windows Hello, which comes with that PC, and be on my way to do two-factor authentication using Windows Hello when I try to gain access. So self-enrollment of mechanisms and factors also becomes really important.
Yeah, this is a very good use case. And so actually endpoints themselves and the network access are a big piece of equation when it comes to securing the endpoint session, right? So having said that, I would like to see that what role does MFA play here, Vishnu?
Absolutely. So that's a good transition from users to endpoints, right? If you remember those 4 segments. So now let's talk about securing the endpoints themselves, right? So basically what happens is if the endpoint itself should be able to communicate with a cloud service to add a layer of MFA on top of it. Even though the first level is authenticated against your AD, for instance, or LDAP, which is obviously brokered by the cloud service as well. But in addition to that, as an IT administrator, security administrator, must be able to also define endpoint MFA profiles in this cloud solution. So then I know that for a given set of endpoints, especially these days, a lot of BYOD will happen, right? So you should be able to push your agents on these endpoints, enroll them, and then assign MFA profiles to them. So even if you are not connected to an AD or you are domain joined, you should be able to, if you're using, for example, IWA or zero sign-on, which we have a patent for Idaptive, you should be able to gain access to your endpoint using passwordless technologies, and then gain access to other applications from, let's say, the IAM portal, in this case, Idaptive portal. The other use case is that, you should be able to leverage hidden factors or hidden factor technology such as certificate-based authentication. There are these standards where you can go all the way to LOA 3 and 4 by using derived credentials on mobile phones, which sort of replicate smart cards and personal identity verification standards as laid down by NIST. So a lot of these hidden factors based on certificate-based authentication is also a very secure as well as very UX-friendly way of authenticating your device with a cloud solution such as Idaptive.
Wonderful. So this is again, like when you talk about endpoints now, this is the biggest question is, hey, I can execute my endpoints, but what will happen to my access infrastructure? What will happen to my VPNs, CASBs, and proxies, right? So the another segment we talked about. Can you please share a little bit on that, Vishnu?
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's shift our focus to securing the infrastructure, and this actually is really important, because the good thing is that let's say now you are suddenly gone remote, and instead of having a VPN solution which is always on, the recommendation would then be to use a CASB service, right? In that case, you can use the MFA service that comes with the CASB solution, right? or use a MFA provider, and most of these CASBs have integration where they can bring in an MFA provider such as Idaptive. So this is a slide, and the figure is attributed to Gartner. This was published in one of their very recent research papers, where they dedicated an entire paper, and all the details are in that slide, on securing remote worker access. And in this figure, they highlight all the layers where you can apply MFA, including VDI, VPN. You have ZTNA, they call it the Zero Trust Network Access, which is basically anything that lets you gain access to resources through networks. So there are all these network security, ADC providers, edge security providers, and then there's this VPN and CASB itself, and obviously, last but not the least, you have the applications at the very top, which are protected by modern access protocols such as single sign-on and others. So you put those modern protocols and applications based on that, and you protect everything in between the user and that application, whether you're gaining access to that application through a VPN or CASB or a VDI solution. Always ensure that there is a MFA-backed access policy to that network infrastructure. So that really highlights some of the use cases that I would like to highlight is obviously VPN. The usage of VPN has shot up in the past 2-3 months, and the good news is that all of the VPN providers, such as Palo Alto Global Protect, or if you're talking about Cisco's ASA, they have a very mature, network security, solutions which support radius-based as well as SAML-based VPN MFA, right? So obviously, radius is a little legacy, and it has dependency on the radius, the VPN client itself, in terms of number of mechanisms it can support. But excuse me, if you're using a SAML-based VPN authentication solution, then you're pretty much able to leverage all the mechanisms that are then provided by the IAM or the MFA provider, for example, Idaptive, because then you're no longer at the mercy of limitations which may exist in the VPN client interface. And then obviously, most of the VDI solutions such as AWS Workspace do have a MFA plugin as well. So you can, if you have a AWS Workspace solution, you can delegate MFA to providers such as Idaptive. So wherever there is a hook or a plug-and-play solution supported by your infrastructure provider, such as VPN or VDI, then always make full use of that by plugging in an MFA provider integration such as Idaptive. And a couple of other solutions, obviously, ADCs. So if you have, let's say, F5s or Citrix NetScalers fronting your application, then pretty much all of these application delivery controllers support integration or delegation of authentication to a third-party, IAM provider such as Idaptive. So when users try to access the application, which is getting load balanced by let's say an F5 or an Nginx, then the authentication is delegated by the ADC to the Idaptive cloud, where you can pretty much have the right risk-based, for instance, or policy or role-based authentication profile for the various access requests. And last but not the least, in terms of the network infrastructure, the CASBs itself. So think of CASB as a full blown up version of, let's say, an ADC in the cloud, right? So the same concept that applies to an on-prem ADC applies to a CASB as well, with full session level visibility. So in this case, CASBs have session level, data level visibility, and you can take advantage of that and actually have continuous monitoring of sessions, and then do on-demand MFA based on the integration level with the CASB and the IAM providers such as Idaptive, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's great, Vishnu. I think that kind of gets into the next segment that you talked about, the one apps. End of the day, that's all end of the day, it is all apps, because all our digital assets being accessed through the apps, and all we are doing, all this access control, everything to kind of regulate and make sure our digital assets are protected through apps. So in that scenario, Vishnu, it's like, how does one secure the modern or legacy applications through this access management and MFA solutions?
Yep. That's a great segue into this next section. Is basically if you are ensuring that these applications, and obviously it all boils down to these remote workers' productivity, right? So if you are enabling these remote workers to use their to the endpoints, whether PCs or mobile, to gain access to their cloud apps or mobile apps with a single set of credentials, commonly known as single sign-on, right? And supported very well by the protocols of these modern applications, SAML, OIDC, and such, right? Or if you're talking about machine-to-machine communication, then OAuth becomes really important, where you can be using different workflows within OAuth. So definitely single sign-on to cloud apps using your endpoints with a mobile phone or PCs, and then also added on top of that the layer of MFA is really critical, right? So so when we talk about legacy application, you mentioned, right? So definitely a lot of times what happens is you do not want a VPN solution to be the be-all, end-all solution for your remote workforce, right? Because VPN is kind of a tricky solution. It is really easy to open up your corporate network and let your remote workforce be efficient and productive instantly, but at the same time, you're giving the keys to the kingdom to the remote workforce, right? If they gain access to the VPN. So a lot of time, the best practice would be to actually leverage a VPN-less solution, which basically gives you secure access without having to open up a VPN to your corporate network. And in this case, there is a proxy sitting in front of the protected application, and the user is actually using a different URL to gain access, and the actual application URL is protected by this proxy that sits on-prem in front of the application. So that obviously is sort of limiting your risk, which otherwise comes with a VPN solution. And talking about applications, and I touched upon this a few slides ago, that you may want to have a very fine-grained application protection based on the severity or the sensitiveness that an application may have. So you should have per app MFA profiles or authentication profiles. And in this case, you're not actually pivoting on the user identity. You're actually pivoting on the security risk that may get exposed if a malicious hacker gets into a given app. So you're basically pivoting on the app and then saying that if a given role is A, then apply this authentication profile to this app. If the role is B, then apply this authentication profile to this app. So you should be able to design, and you should design per app authentication profiles based on the level of risk coming with an access request.
So thank you, Vishnu. That covers, and then that kind of, finally, then last segment you talked about the intelligently limiting access when it comes to zero trust identity approach. When you talk about this, that always kind of excites me, because this is much for like MFA based on UBA, user behavior analytics, which is all the modern buzzwords like artificial intelligence or machine learning use it to kind of leverage that. And so this is one of the areas it personally excites me, because I know that I've been in the industry for a long time. Before our approach in the past was like most reactive. I get hacked, I have a problem, then I will find out why it is. It will take another 6 months to find out. But here, this UBA helps, I believe, that all this modern technology to proactively look at things and then deny access or restrict to safeguard our assets. Can you please share your thoughts on that, Vishnu?
Absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, UBA is like that silent engine that powers and works silently, just like a duck, swims. It paddles really hard under the water, but on the surface it just looks like a very elegant flow. And similarly, a good UBA solution is able to understand the remote worker behavior in a very, very efficient manner and in real time. By efficient, I mean it should be able to process a large amount of data. Now we're talking about thousands of employees going remote, and you need to build a behavior pattern for each and every user, right, in real time, because every time you generate a request, that translates into an event which goes to the UBA engine, which gets processed. And then it should be able to detect anomaly in real time, feed it back to the identity cloud, and tell the identity cloud what is the risk level. And all of this happens in a fraction of a second, right? Because otherwise, obviously, what's the point if you're doing this offline and doing it after the fact, right? So it should be real time. It should feed back into a real policy based on which you're able to then step up and down your application's MFA. And then it should be, let's say it does detect an anomaly. Then what does it provide in terms of orchestrating a response to that anomaly, right? So it should have a way to plug into external systems through webhooks or APIs, so that it can then trigger a workflow which helps in remediating a security incident, right? So that is really key. It's not just about detecting risk, but also how do you respond to a risk which has already happened, or a potential breach that is happening, so that you can then mitigate it in real time. And the second piece is the reporting itself. On the MFA piece that talked about, the solution should come with a very rich set of reports, inbuilt as well as customizable, such that the IT and security teams are able to very quickly and efficiently get visibility into what is my coverage area in terms of a given level of assurance. What do I have the right mechanisms? If I do have the right mechanisms, then is the entire population, 100% of my remote workforce for that particular role, is fully provisioned with those mechanisms, and then I should be able to revise this every 24 hours and see the rate of adoption of a given MFA policy, right? So not just the UBA piece, but also the reporting that comes with it, which also helps you then make sure that you have good adoption as well as good incident investigation as well. So that brings me sort of to the conclusion part, and I know, Senthil, that you have a good case study as well, if I'm not mistaken, with Idaptive and Sennovate, in the spirit of zero trust and remote workforce. Do you want to discuss that?
Yes, absolutely, Vishnu. Absolutely, I'm happy to discuss it. But thank you. It's a wonderful presentation. That's a very valuable information, and always I really feel excited whenever I see this. Maybe is it okay if I kind of jump onto this case study?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. This is one of success story that Idaptive and Sennovate together had. I would like to share with the audience here. We have a customer here in South Bay Technologies. They are a very modern company, completely modern company, one of the modern companies I've ever seen. This company is, they deliver cognitive operating system that enables self-driving enterprise. Basically, they understand how the business works and makes a real-time recommendations for their clients. They predicts the outcome and also act autonomously. When I met them first time a couple of years ago, they had a big challenge. The challenge is that, how do I get this? This is again, it's kind of a startup, privately held company. They got the investment and they're growing rapidly, and they wanted to make sure that they meet all their customer requirements, because they have all the premium customers have very stringent security requirements. Having said that, one of the things they wanted to have is they wanted to meet all the regulatory compliances requirements, say like SOC 2, ISO 27001, those kind of auditing, which is kind of a mandatory from their clients, and also they wanted to put confidence into their clients by having those certifications. Then also, this company is a global company. They have branches, they have offices there in Romania, India, here in US, and few other countries. And like I said, this is a modern company. They have remote workers, and also they have a bring your own device policies in all global locations. Again, this is kind of a knowledge-based company, because they are delivering their analytics or artificial intelligence, if you will, AI-based solutions to their customers. So intellectual property is another thing they wanted to protect, and also gain customer confidence. All these things they wanted to achieve in a shorter period of time, and also they are very particular about operating costs as well. So then this is a challenge brought to us, and then we actually partner with Idaptive to provide the solution what they are looking for. Basically, what we did is we partner with Idaptive and then provide the strategic solution. Pretty much whatever that Vishnu has been presenting, this customer is pretty much using all of them. We architect the solution, a comprehensive end-to-end identity management solution that includes the single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, actually adaptive multi-factor authentication, lifecycle management, mobile and endpoint devices. In addition to that, also infrastructure, VPN access, management and stuff like that. So this is we delivered everything as an identity as a service. So the result, their compliance, they are certified with SOC 2 and ISO 27001. Their customer acquisition reduced by half. What does it mean is customers, all this auditing, or always every time the new customer comes in, they come for auditing. Then all the identity requirements, security requirements readily in place. so that they can easily pass through the auditing to get that customer acquisition quickly. Remote workers, so like I said, they are a global company, remote workers all over there. Their identities are secured, and that brings a peace of mind for them. And their intellectual property has been secured because of this identity management and multi-factor authentication and solutions all together. And also they have a very good behavior analytics in place to predict and real time and apply any solve any concerns or any access that has to be denied. It's all done in real time. And so the cost. So originally when they started, it's all manual process, manual provisioning in all the applications, and so many usernames and passwords. It's pretty hard for them to handle that, and then that's the main reason they came to the solution. After that, it's all done through Idaptive platform, and that they save cost by 50%. Their productivity really increased by 73%, and no need to say that. And for this customer, it's funny. Last week I was talking to them and talk about how this COVID-19 situation works, and then they said, like, since they've been prepared and then the solutions in place, and they're kind of used to this kind of remote and work because of this global organization, their productivity actually increased during this Corona-19, and then they didn't have to do anything in addition to what they already had from the Idaptive to kind of secure their assets. So that is a good news here I would like to share. Basically, what Sennovate does for them is, like, we provide 24/7 support, and then taking care of their provisioning, deprovisioning end-to-end, taking care of their Microsoft Active Directory security groups, access, and app integrations all through Idaptive platform, mobile endpoints, and we manage their role-based access through my Idaptive platform and workflow, lifecycle management. And also we provide all the end user support for the customer. So having said that, kind of going by, this is very nice of Mr. Avery Buffington, to say Director of Cyber Architecture, to provide us the testimony. And this is kind of for you can read. This is what Idaptive and Sennovate together we deliver the value for the customer. And that comes to an end of this presentation. I think we have 1 minute, probably. I don't know whether we have a few questions here. I don't think we have some time to answer those questions. But anyway, I think if you have any questions, anybody, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sorry. I think so this is the final slide, and then you have all the contact information here. Please feel free to reach out to us if any questions. But thank you again. Thank you for everyone for attending in spite of this COVID situation. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Vishnu, for the wonderful presentation.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Senthil, for your time, and everybody, please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.